Welcome, traveler. Before the story begins, let me welcome you. Here, in these pages, you are not just a reader. You are a companion, a witness, and sometimes a participant in the journeys ahead. Whether you're drawn by adventure, longing for laughter, or searching for a quiet moment of wonder, I hope you find a little of what you seek. Settle in. Take a deep breath. The world may be wild, but for now, you're safe here, among friends and stories. Wherever the path leads, thank you for walking it with me. The cold bit at Akali's cheeks as she sprinted across the narrow mountain path, her breath steaming in the icy night. Her lungs burned, her side throbbed from a deep cut just beneath her ribs, where a blade had found her minutes ago. Blood seeped through her wrappings, leaving a trail like ink on parchment. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath, glancing over her shoulder. 3 silhouettes followed, leaping between rocks and outcroppings with silent precision. Their masks gleamed under the crescent moon. Kinku agents. Once, they were her kin. Now, they hunted her. She pushed harder, feet skidding on loose gravel, clutching her side. Every pulse of pain reminded her she wouldn't outrun them forever. "Need shelter. Somewhere to hide. Somewhere." Her gaze darted ahead, and then she saw it. A small building nestled against the cliff. Warm light flickering behind its windows. Smoke coiled from a chimney. A sign hung crookedly above the door. Atreus's hearth sign. A bakery. Here? She had no time to question it. Akali staggered toward the door, nearly collapsing as she reached it. Her fist pounded once, twice, before her legs gave out and she slumped against the wood. "Please," she rasped. "Help." Her vision swam, but she heard footsteps inside. The door creaked open, and a shadow loomed over her, broad-shouldered, towering, wrapped in an apron dusted with flour. "By the mountain," the man said, voice deep with surprise. "Akali." Her lips parted. "You know me. I've heard stories." Before she could respond, black spots danced at the edges of her sight. "They're coming." And then darkness took her. Moments earlier, the chase. Before the bakery had appeared in the distance, Akali had fought them in the woods. It was supposed to be a simple mission, a sabotage, a warning to the Order, but somehow they'd ambushed her instead. 3 against 1. Each move, each strike, was meant to maim, not kill. They wanted her alive. "Come home, Akali," one had called. "The Kinku can forgive, but not if you keep running." "I am home," she had snarled, twisting midair to deflect a thrown kunai with the flat of her kama. Her blade danced in the moonlight, cutting arcs of silver against the dark. Another ninja rushed her from behind. She spun low, sweeping his legs. He hit the ground hard, but rolled with it, already rising. They were trained well, too well. A third flanked her side, blade gleaming. Akali darted backward, but too late. The edge kissed her skin, slicing deep. Pain, blood. She growled, slamming a smoke bomb to the ground. A hiss of cover, a swirl of shadows. She bolted, weaving through the trees, heart hammering, but they followed. Always behind her, silent as ghosts, until she crested the final hill and saw the light. Inside the bakery, the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket when she woke. Soft firelight danced across wooden beams. She lay on a bench beside a hearth, bandages wrapped snugly around her middle. The scent of baking bread filled the air, rich, yeasty, comforting. Akali groaned, blinking up at the ceiling. "Where? You're safe." She turned her head. The man from the doorway stood over a counter, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in a mound of dough. His forearms flexed as he kneaded, powerful yet gentle. His hair fell in loose waves over his brow, and a thick apron clung to his broad frame. Her eyes widened in recognition. Pantheon? He glanced back, lips curling faintly. Atreus, actually. Pantheon died when the stars abandoned him. Akali winced as she sat up. You're a baker now. I am many things. Warrior, fool, baker. He pressed the dough flat, dusting it with flour, but mostly tired of war. She watched him silently. Her body ached, but her curiosity burned brighter. Why help me? Because you knocked on my door. A sudden noise outside. The crunch of footsteps on snow. Akali stiffened. They're here. Pantheon wiped his hands on a cloth, reaching for something in the corner. A long polearm. Her eyes widened. You kept the spear? He tested its weight, nodding once. Didn't expect to need it again. Then he turned, striding for the door. Stay inside, he told her, voice low. You're not dying today. And with that, he stepped into the night. Akali watched from the window, her body heavy with exhaustion. Every breath ached, every muscle trembled. She wanted to move, wanted to help, but her limbs refused. Her hand pressed weakly against the glass as Pantheon turned toward her, victorious beneath the moonlight. He met her gaze and gave a small, tired smile. Stay there, he called gently. I'll handle the rest. Moments later, the door creaked open, letting in a gust of cold air, and Pantheon's solid figure. His chest rose and fell steadily as he set down his spear by the door. His gaze softened when he saw her still slumped by the window. You shouldn't be on your feet, he murmured. I wasn't, she rasped. Just watching. Without another word, he approached, scooping her into his arms with surprising gentleness. Akali felt herself being lifted, cradled against warmth and strength. You've lost too much blood, he said quietly. You need rest. She didn't protest. Her head fell against his shoulder as he carried her deeper into the bakery, past shelves of bread and sacks of flour. He pushed open a simple wooden door at the back, revealing a small room. A bed, a desk, a single candle burning low. He set her down onto the bed, pulling a wool blanket over her. You sleep, he said, adjusting the covers. I'll finish the bread. Her eyelids fluttered, the warmth of the quilt wrapping around her like a cocoon. You're kind, she whispered drowsily. Pantheon chuckled softly, not often called that. As she drifted into sleep, the faint sounds of baking filled the air. The rustle of flour, the tap of a rolling pin, the hollow knock of dough tested for readiness. The scent of bread, rich, yeasty, alive, drifted into the room like a comforting lullaby. Hours passed before Akali stirred again. The fire still glowed in the hearth outside the room. She inhaled deeply, the aroma of freshly baked loaves lingering like an embrace. Why do you do it? She murmured, voice hoarse but curious. Pantheon glanced over from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a cloth. Do what? Bake. He paused, then leaned against the doorframe, thoughtful. I used to wield war, he said slowly. My hands were meant for breaking, for holding a spear, for ending lives. He looked down at his calloused palms, turning them over in the firelight. But when the stars abandoned me, I realized I had nothing to show for it. No legacy. Just ashes. Just blood. He stepped forward, setting a loaf on the windowsill to cool. Bread is different. You take flour, water, salt, simple things. You knead, You wait, you give it heat, and when it rises, it's proof. His eyes softened, distant. Proof that patience can create, that strength can build. He looked at her, his gaze steady. It's the opposite of war. Akali watched him quietly from the bed, her lips parting slightly. That's beautiful, she whispered. Pantheon shrugged, half smiling. It's breath. She let her head sink back onto the pillow, a small smile curling at the edges of her mouth. It's more than bread, she murmured. Her sleep claimed her again. It's peace. Pantheon stood a while longer, watching the last embers in the hearth. Outside, the mountain wind howled. Inside, the baker worked. Chapter 2. Kneading Hearts. The morning sun crept over the peaks of Targon, painting the stone cliffs in gold and rose. Light filtered through the shutters of the small bedroom, falling across Akali's face. She stirred beneath the quilt, wincing slightly as she shifted. But the deep ache from last night had softened into a dull throb. She was alive, and something smelled amazing. Her stomach growled loudly. Akali pushed herself up slowly, biting back a groan as her ribs protested. The bandages were snug but clean. Someone had changed them while she slept. Her eyes drifted around the modest room, the simple desk, the wooden chair, the single candle stub still faintly smoking, and beyond the doorway, warmth, light, and the smell of something buttery and sweet. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, planting her bare feet on the cool floor. Time to see what the baker's up to. The kitchen. When she stepped into the main room, she paused. Pantheon stood at the stove, bathed in golden sunlight, stirring something in a large pan. His apron hung low across his hips, muscles shifting beneath the sleeves of his tunic as he moved with quiet focus. A loaf of bread cooled on the windowsill, while fresh fruit gleamed in a wooden bowl. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled softly. "You're up." Akali's stomach growled again in reply. "I heard," Pantheon chuckled. "Sit." She lowered herself carefully onto a stool at the counter, watching as he plated up a stack of golden brown flatbreads drizzled with honey, alongside fresh berries and slices of cheese. "I wasn't expecting this," she admitted, eyeing the spread. "I don't believe in half measures," Pantheon said simply, setting the plate in front of her. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Akali picked up a piece of warm bread, tearing it with her fingers. The inside was pillowy, flecked with herbs. She took a bite and immediately moaned softly. "Oh my gods." Pantheon's brow lifted, amused. "Good? This is divine." She mumbled through another bite. "Like, better than Noxian street food divine." "I'll take that as a compliment." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her eat with quiet satisfaction. When she paused to breathe, he nodded toward her bandages. "You're healing, but you're not ready to leave yet." Akali frowned. "I can fight." Pantheon raised an eyebrow. "Not with a torn side and half your blood missing. No, you're staying until you're strong enough." She narrowed her eyes at him, but then sighed, defeated. "Fine. Good." He pushed a mug of warm tea toward her. "In the meantime, your work." She blinked. "Work? You said you wanted to learn." His lips curved into a subtle grin. "You're officially my apprentice." Akali stared down at her empty plate, then back up at his imposing figure. "This is going to be weird." Pantheon laughed softly. "Only if you make it." Lessons at the hearth. The next few days passed in a rhythm Akali had never known. Each morning, Pantheon woke before sunrise to stoke the fire, grinding grains into flour, mixing doughs by hand, preparing proofing baskets. Akali followed, sometimes groggily, sometimes wide-eyed, absorbing everything. He taught her how to measure by feel, palming flour instead of weighing, testing hydration by the stickiness between fingertips. Bread isn't numbers, he explained, guiding her hands into a mixing bowl. It's balance. It's listening. She wasn't convinced until she kneaded for the first time, pressing the dough under his watchful eye. It's alive, she murmured, feeling the texture shift beneath her palms. Exactly. His voice was low, pleased. It responds to you. Of course, there were incidents. The first batch of flatbreads she rolled out were too thick. These could double as shields, Pantheon teased. Another time she forgot to slash the tops of the balls before baking, leading to awkward, split loaves. My bread exploded, Akali groaned, holding up the jagged loaf. War bread, Pantheon deadpanned. They laughed often. She hadn't laughed like this in a long time, and slowly, the space between them shifted. Each time Pantheon guided her hands on the dough, her skin tingled beneath his. Each time their shoulders brushed at the counter, she caught herself lingering. She noticed how he wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm, how his eyes softened when he watched the bread rise, and he noticed the way her hair fell into her face when she concentrated, the small crease in her brow when she failed, the quiet pride when she succeeded. They moved around each other like dancers, familiar, hesitant, closer each day. One evening, on the fourth night, as they pulled a tray of golden pastries from the oven, Akali leaned against the counter, watching Pantheon brush them with honey glaze. You know, she said softly, you're nothing like the stories. He glanced over. What stories? Pantheon, the unbreakable spear, slayer of titans. They make you sound untouchable. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. But here you are, baking scones. Pantheon set the brush down, meeting her gaze steadily. I was a weapon, he said quietly. Not a man. He stepped closer, stopping just across from her. Now I'm learning what it means to build, instead of destroy. Akali felt her breath hitch. The warmth between them felt heavier tonight, thicker than the heat of the oven. She looked up at him, her voice soft. And do you miss it? The fight? His hand brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek, fingers lingering for a heartbeat. Not tonight, he murmured. Their eyes held, a heartbeat stretched long. Then, two. But then Pantheon pulled back, clearing his throat, turning away. Let's clean up, he said gruffly. Akali exhaled, a small, knowing smile curling at the corners of her lips. Maybe peace wasn't so boring after all. Chapter 3. Ashes of the Spear. The fire in the hearth had burned low. Only embers remained, casting faint orange glows across the bakery walls. Outside, the mountain wind sighed against the windows. Inside, Pantheon sat alone at the long wooden table, a single candle flickering beside him. Akali was asleep in his bed again, her breathing steady beyond the door. He could hear it faintly, a small comfort. He stared down at his hands, rough, calloused palms, fingers marked with faint scars. Hands that once held a spear, hands that once wielded the wrath of the stars, hands that now kneaded dough. He flexed them slowly, feeling the ache of old injuries, the weight of old sins, and his mind drifted backward. The battles of the aspect. Long ago, before the stars betrayed him, before the divine mantle slipped from his grasp, he had carried the name Pantheon proudly. He was the war god incarnate, the celestial spear, a being forged for one purpose: to fight. He remembered standing atop the peak of Mount Targon, the heavens swirling above as the stars descended like molten fire. He had gazed down at Runeterra, its plains and rivers stretched below, and had felt invincible. He remembered the battle against Aatrox, when the fallen Darkin cleaved through entire phalanxes, his blade blotting out the sun. Pantheon had charged alone across the scorched fields, spear raised, shield shattered, refusing to fall even as Aatrox's dark blade pierced his chest. He had fought even as his divine power flickered, even as the stars turned away, and when the aspect left him to die, it was Atreus who stood back up. A mortal man, a stubborn man, a man too furious to yield. He had beaten back the Darkin with nothing but his own fury, his own broken body. He had won, but the cost. Names in the ashes. He closed his eyes, the names surfacing unbidden. Iona, his childhood friend, who had tried to dissuade him from climbing the mountain, slain during a Noxian incursion while he fought elsewhere. Doros, his commander, mentor, and the man who placed the first spear in his hand, crushed beneath a falling siege tower while Atreus had led a doomed charge. Helia, his sister, his gentle, stubborn sister, gone to sickness he could not fight with a blade. And so many others, brothers in arms, lovers, friends. Each battle left him standing alone on fields of the dead, the wind cold against his skin, the victory hollow in his chest. What had all the fighting brought him? A broken body, an empty house, a name feared, not loved. He pressed a hand over his heart, feeling the quiet thud beneath his ribs. I've buried too many. He whispered to the darkness. The turning, the moment he knew he was done, was not a grand revelation on a battlefield. It was a small, quiet thing, a village, a raid. He had arrived too late. A child sat amid the ashes, holding a loaf of burned bread in her tiny hands, rocking back and forth. She looked up at him, not in awe, not in gratitude, in fear. She saw a killer, not a savior, and in that instant, the spear felt heavier than it ever had. His armor felt suffocating. He dropped the spear and walked away, back to the hearth. The next day, he built his oven. With stone, with ash, with hands that had once destroyed. He gathered grain, traded with the farmers down the slopes, and learned to mill flour by hand. The first loaf was terrible. The second, barely edible. The third, better. And slowly, day by day, the act of creating something nourished him in a way no battle ever had. He baked bread to feed, not to conquer. He shaped loaves instead of war formations. He learned the quiet joy of kneading, waiting, rising, instead of killing, conquering, raising. And with each loaf, the spear grew dustier in the corner. Present night, Pantheon exhaled slowly, drawing himself back to the now. Akali stirred in the other room. He heard the creak of the bed as she shifted, her quiet murmur. He stood, lifting the candle, and walked toward the bedroom door. She was half awake, blinking blearily at him. Couldn't sleep? She asked groggily. No, he said softly. She patted the bed beside her. Sit. He hesitated, then did. They sat in the dark, listening to the wind. Was it always bread? She asked quietly. No, he admitted. At first, it was just not war, but then it became more. It became a way to honor what I'd lost, to honor those who couldn't build anymore. He looked down at his hands again, then at hers, small, nimble, inked with the shadows of a ninja's life. These hands have taken so much from the world, he murmured. I want them to finally give something back. Akali's gaze softened. She reached out, placing her hand gently atop his. You already have, she whispered. The warmth between them deepened in the quiet night, neither breaking the silence. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead. Inside, two warriors sat together, scarred, stubborn, searching, and for the first time in years, Pantheon felt like he wasn't alone. The wind had died down. The mountain air, so often biting, had quieted into a gentle hush that cradled the bakery in stillness. A low fire glowed in the hearth, casting long shadows across the stone walls and wooden beams. Akali stood in the doorway to the bedroom, watching Pantheon by the kitchen table as he stacked cooled loaves into a cloth basket. You never stop moving, she said, arms crossed loosely over her chest. Pantheon looked up. There's always work. Maybe, she said, stepping closer. But even a mountain rests. Her voice was soft, purposeful. Something different shimmered between them now. No longer just companionship or flirtation. Something deeper, heavier, warmer. He straightened as she reached him. She was close now, close enough that her presence pressed against him like heat. Let me take some of that weight, she whispered. He met her gaze, his breath caught. For all his battles, all the wars he had endured, this was what truly disarmed him. The way she looked at him, not as a god, not as a legend, but as a man. Her hand rose, fingertips brushing his chest, resting lightly over his heart. I see you, she said. Not the stars, not the spear, just you. Pantheon's hands came to rest on her waist, uncertain at first, then anchoring her as if afraid she'd disappear. His voice was husky, quiet. And I see you, Akali, not the rebel, not the ninja, just you. The silence that followed was its own language. Then she leaned up, closing the space between them. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, like something long held back, finally given permission to bloom. Her hands slid up around his neck, his arms wrapped around her, lifting her slightly, drawing her into him fully. They kissed again, slower, longer this time. Her mouth parted, his breath hitched as her tongue brushed his, exploratory, teasing. His hand cupped the back of her head, fingers tangled in her hair. The kiss deepened with quiet urgency, years of pain and longing unraveling between them. When they parted, they lingered there, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other in. Akali whispered, "Let's not be alone tonight." Pantheon didn't answer with words. He simply lifted her in his arms, strong and sure, and carried her through the bedroom door. The bedroom. The air was warmer here. The firelight flickered across the quilt, the wooden walls, their skin. He set her down gently on the bed, and she pulled him down with her, their bodies molding together easily. They kissed again, longer now, slower. Their hands moved over each other in reverence, not haste. Akali's fingers slid beneath the hem of his tunic, feeling the warmth of his skin. His body was a map of battle, scars old and new, but beneath them was a man who craved softness, craved touch, craved her. He let her undress him piece by piece. First the tunic, then the undershirt. She kissed along his collarbone, over his heart. He shuddered, not from cold, but from the quiet unraveling of walls he'd spent years building. His hands found the ties at her waist, undoing them, slowly, deliberately. Her shirt fell away, and his breath caught as he looked at her. Not just her body, but the totality of her, lit by the glow of the firelight. Strong, beautiful, alive, they came together again beneath the sheets, bodies pressed close, breaths mingling. There was no need for words. Their movements spoke of years without peace, of bruised hearts, learning how to beat again. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And when they finally lay tangled in each other's arms, sweat cooling on their skin, neither spoke for a long time. Later, Pantheon lay on his back, eyes fixed on the wooden beams above. Akali rested against his chest, her fingers tracing the scars along his side. "I didn't think I'd feel this again," she whispered. He turned his head to look at her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You and me both." She smiled against his skin, and he felt it, more deeply than he thought possible. "I like this version of you," she murmured. He chuckled softly. "The baker, the man," she corrected. He kissed her temple, lingering there, and as the fire dimmed, they drifted into sleep, entwined in something far stronger than war, far deeper than pain, something rising, like bread in a hearth. Chapter 5. Smoke on the horizon. The dawn broke slow and golden over the mountains. Inside the bakery, warmth lingered beneath the quilts. Akali stirred first, stretching languidly against the broad chest beneath her cheek. She felt Pantheon's steady breathing, the rise and fall of a man at peace. "I could get used to this," she murmured. Pantheon stirred, his arm tightening around her waist. His lips brushed her hair in silent agreement. For a few blessed moments, the world outside didn't exist. No war, no kinku, no gods, just warmth, just them. But then, a knock, urgent, harsh, a fist pounding against the front door. Pantheon's body went still beneath her. Akali lifted her head, alert now. Another knock, louder. Pantheon sighed deeply, kissed her forehead once, then rose from the bed. His silhouette, tall and solid in the dawn light, moved toward his discarded tunic. Akali sat up, a quiet unease curling in her gut. At the door, when Pantheon opened the door, a village boy stood panting on the threshold, eyes wild with terror. "Please, you have to come!" the boy cried. "The town, it's burning! He's here!" Pantheon's face darkened. "Who?" "The one they call Crixes," the boy gasped. "The Black Flame. He came down from the northern cliffs with raiders. They're destroying everything. Please, sir, we were told you lived here. You're the only one who can stop him." Pantheon's hands curled into fists at his sides. The name hit him like a spear to the chest. Crixes, the warlord he'd once defeated in the Shuraman foothills, a tyrant who had sworn revenge as Pantheon left him broken in the dust, a man who should have been dead, and now he was back. Pantheon's gaze lifted toward the distant peaks. Faintly, too faint for Akali to see, he could already make out the curling black smoke rising over the next valley. The choice? Akali appeared beside him, leaning against the doorframe, still pale but determined. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "No," Pantheon said quietly. "You'll need me." I said no. His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. Akali stepped forward, fire in her eyes. "Don't do this." Pantheon turned toward her fully then, and for a moment, the war mask, the old face of Pantheon, the aspect of war, returned to his features. "I won't lose you too," he said, his voice raw. She blinked. "I'm not someone you get to protect like a piece of bread in your pantry." Pantheon exhaled sharply. "You're still healing, Akali. If you come, you'll slow me down, or worse. I'd rather die by your side than sit here useless while you risk your life," she snapped. Pantheon stepped close. His hands came to her shoulders. He bent his forehead to hers. "I've only just found peace with you," he murmured. "Don't make me lose it tonight." Their eyes locked. Battle-hardened wills clashing without a single blade drawn. But then, his hands shifted. He pressed a kiss to her lips. Deep, aching, final. "I'm sorry." And before she could move, before she could guess his intent, he tied a long rope around her waist and anchored it to the bedpost, knotting it fast with a sailor's precision. "Pantheon!" she yelled, struggling. "I can't let you follow. Let me go!" she cried, thrashing against the binds. He kissed her one last time. Softly, sadly. "I'll come back," he promised. Then he turned, grabbing his spear from the corner, his shield from the rack, striding out into the cold dawn. The door slammed shut behind him. Akali screamed after him, struggling harder. "Damn you, Atris!" she yelled. "You better come back!" The road to battle. Pantheon strode down the path toward the rising smoke, his silhouette framed by the pale light of morning. The spear felt heavy in his grip, but familiar. "Just when I thought I'd left this behind," he muttered. But his steps did not falter. The town awaited. The villain returned, and though he had found peace in the hearth, he was still the spear, and tonight he would be war again. Chapter 6. The last spear rises. The rope cut into her skin. Akali twisted, teeth gritted, sweat slick on her brow. "Damn him," she growled, pulling harder. The knot held fast at first, but Akali wasn't just a ninja by name. She shifted her weight, braced her foot against the bedpost, and slowly worked a hidden blade from her sleeve. "You really thought this would stop me?" she whispered fiercely. With a quick flick, the blade sliced through the rope. She staggered forward, heart pounding. "Hang on, Pantheon," she muttered, grabbing her boots and strapping her gear over the bandages still hugging her ribs. Out the door, down the path, toward the rising black smoke on the horizon. The battlefield. The village was ablaze when she arrived. Fires licking the thatched roofs, villagers scattering in terror. Akali's gaze swept frantically through the chaos, and then she saw him. Pantheon stood at the village square's center, spear planted in the earth, shield raised. He was bleeding from a deep gash along his thigh, another at his shoulder. His breath came in labored gasps. Across from him loomed Crixus, a towering figure in jagged black armor, a cruel blade dripping with flame. "Still standing, old man," Crixus sneered. "Should have stayed in your oven." Pantheon spat blood onto the dirt. "Not while there's something worth protecting." He surged forward, spear flashing. Their weapons clashed in a burst of sparks, ringing across the night. Akali watched, frozen for a heartbeat. Then Pantheon staggered. Crixus's blade drove deep into his side. "No!" Akali screamed. Pantheon collapsed to one knee, his spear slipping from his grasp. Crixus raised his sword high for the killing blow, but before it could fall, A flash of silver. Akali leapt from the shadows, kunai whirling, slicing across Crixus's exposed throat. A spray of dark blood arced through the air. Crixus gurgled, stumbling back. She spun low, severing his hamstring. He fell, roaring in rage, and with a final brutal thrust, she drove her blade through his heart. Crixus shuddered once, and was still. The hill. Pantheon. Akali dropped beside him, panting, chest heaving. He lay slumped against the base of the fountain, his hand pressed weakly over the bleeding wound. Akali, he rasped. She pulled his arm over her shoulders, dragging him slowly, step by step, away from the burning square, up a grassy hill overlooking the village. He groaned with each movement, but said nothing. At the top, she eased him down onto the grass, propping him gently against a stone. The stars were out now, shimmering coldly above. "You're going to be fine," she whispered fiercely. "I'll get help. Pantheon's hand found hers, squeezing faintly. "No, Akali." His voice was soft now, fading. "No more fighting. Not tonight." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're not dying. Not after everything." He gave a faint smile. "You saved them. You saved them," she whispered back. His gaze lifted to the stars. "I wanted to be more than a weapon," he murmured. "To build, to feed, to love." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You did," she whispered. "You did, Atreus." His thumb brushed her hand faintly. A last touch. "I'm glad it was you," here at the end. And then, as the stars wheeled silently overhead, his hand went still. Akali buried her face in his chest and wept. The burial. The next morning, beneath the rising sun, Akali dug the grave herself. She laid him beneath the hill's lone tree, overlooking the valley. She set his spear and shield as a marker at the head, and she sat by the grave until the last shadows of dawn had fled. Only then did she rise, wiping the dirt from her hands, and walk back toward the small stone cottage. The hearth. Days passed. The oven glowed again. A new hand mixed the dough, kneaded the bread. A new figure stood at the counter, flour dusting her cheeks, her green eyes focused on the task. Akali rolled out the flatbreads, slashed the loaves before baking, fed the villagers who climbed the winding path seeking warmth and nourishment. The bakery sign still read, "Atreus's hearth." She never changed it. And every night, as the fire crackled low, she would glance at the old spear and shield mounted above the mantel. "I hope you're watching," she'd murmur. Then she'd turn back to her dough, the rhythm of creation filling the quiet, because the world still needed bread, and she would honor him, one loaf at a time. The end. Epilogue. The warmth of the hearth. The wind howled bitterly as the traveler trudged up the mountain path. Cloak pulled tight around his shoulders. Snowflakes clung to his lashes. His boots crunched against frozen ground. He hadn't meant to climb this far. He'd been lost for hours in the winding Targon foothills, hoping for shelter, warmth, anything. Then, at last, through the swirling snow, a small building came into view, a stone cottage, smoke curling from a chimney, a faint glow in the windows. Above the door, a weathered wooden sign, "Atreus's hearth." The traveler pushed the door open, a gust of cold air following him inside. Warmth hit him instantly. Thick, fragrant, comforting. The scent of rising bread, of wood smoke and herbs. A fire crackled in the hearth. Behind the counter stood a woman. Her hair was streaked with silver now, tied back loosely. A faint scar traced her left cheek. Tattoos still curled along her arms, though faded with time. She wore an apron dusted with flour, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands deep in a mound of dough. But her green eyes were bright, steady, alive. She looked up as the traveler entered, a small, knowing smile curling at her lips. "Well," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth, "you look half frozen." I wasn't expecting a bakery all the way up here," the traveler stammered. She chuckled softly. "Most don't." He stepped closer, gazing around at the loaves cooling on racks, the simple wooden tables, the shield and spear mounted above the mantel. "Was this place always here?" "Not always," she said quietly, her gaze lingering on the shield. "But long enough." She set a warm flatbread on a plate and pushed it toward him. "Eat," she said. "The mountain takes enough from everyone. Let it give you something back tonight." The traveler sat at the counter, tearing into the bread. It was incredible. He hadn't tasted anything so simple, yet so perfect in years. As he ate, he watched the woman move around the kitchen, kneading, shaping, tending the oven with practiced grace. She hummed under her breath, a quiet rhythm. "Do you live here alone?" he asked. She paused, glancing again at the spear and shield. "I keep the hearth," she said softly, "for someone who left it burning." The traveler followed her gaze. Was he a warrior? She smiled faintly, wistfully. Yes. Then she returned to her bread. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow fell silently. And inside, the baker worked. A legend in her own quiet way. The warmth of the hearth, still alive. The end.